Hey there guys, Templar here, and yes, I am bald and I've shaved both my head and including my beard. Reason being for today's video, in which, if you guys want to know, it's covering, that's correct, Celtic hairstyles of the ancient world. Or, in this case, ancient Celtic hairstyles. Now, I can already hear you guys already. Templar, I already know that much about Celtic hairstyles. I read it here in the books and such and such, and it makes sense. Not exactly. In fact, when we take a look at ancient Celtic hairstyles, there is hardly any images of the ancient Celts having their hairstyles, though our only information actually comes from the Romans and the Greeks. Or including also maybe the Egyptians and Carthaginians. Maybe. It's hard to say. But anyways, how about we get right into the history book at scene of the ancient Celtic people's hairstyles. Now I will be covering of the different regions, actually, such and such of their area that they began with. Now, why don't we actually first go to Gaul, the land of France. Now, when we take a look at France, we normally think of, well, this is a Celtic heartland. It's one of the Celtic regions known as Gaul. And when we think of its people, we don't really understand of its hairstyle. Well, in truth, the Celts of Gaul were a little different compared to other Celtic tribes. Or unique. Reason being, the Celts of Gaul actually, instead of growing out a beard, what they did is grow out their mustache. Now, the really impressive part about this mustache is when they grew it out long as hell. In fact, it's stated by the Romans and Greeks that the Celts actually had to lift up their mustaches just to drink from an ale cup. In other words, just imagine a elongated, well, mustache. Sometimes it went as long as down to their pants. So it's kind of impressive of how long they went down. Now, it is also stated that these would be a majestically interwoven or something like that. I'm not certain, but it is stated the Celts of Gaul had kept this practice from the very early age. Reason being is probably because of the area they lived in. I am told that pretty much in the lands of Gaul at the time were extremely cold during the winters, but during the summers it was, well, actually very breezy, and still made, well, ancient Gaul look extremely, well, cold. So, you can see why they grew out the mustache. But why didn't they grow out the beard? Reason being, it can probably be understood. The only ones that pretty much grew out their beards were actually the ancient Celtic Druids. So, if you guys don't understand, the Druids are the ancient Celtic priests to the old religion, in which they're the only ones that are allowed to grow out their hair and their beard. However, there is a metaphor thing. They're the only ones that can grow out both at the same time. So in other words, the Celts found an easy way to get through this. You can see. So, that's correct. The Gauls grew out their mustaches, but shaved their beards. But in the process, even grew out their long, flowing hair. Now, if you guys don't understand, when it comes to the Celts of Gaul, these Celts were a little different compared to other Celtic regions. It was stated that their hair flowed like the winds and the rivers of the mountains, and yet it never tangled. In fact, this is from a poet during the time of the burning of Rome, or the sacking of Rome, when Brennus and his Celts, well, sacked Rome. It is stated, though, that this type of hairstyle was kept in Gaul, in Galatia, and in some parts of the Hallstatt culture, and some tribes near the Rhine. Now, if you guys don't know what Galatia is, it's that type of Celtic region that's in northern Italy, in other words, south of the Alps, where a Celtic kingdom was established. Now, if you guys also do not know, the Celtic type of flowing hairstyle kept up going like this up until the Romans came around. So, yeah, you can see what happened there. But now, let's go to Celt Iberia. Now, when we take a look at Celt Iberia, we pretty much might see a Romanized Celtic type hairstyle. Now, what I mean by this, it means they shave their beards and they shave their heads. Or including, it's kind of confusing though. Some tribes in Celt Iberia shaved their heads and beards, while one actually shaved their beards, but grew their hair short. Now, it is stated though, depending on which region they lived in, sometimes they actually copied either from the Greeks or the Romans, depending on which era you're looking at. So let's take a look before Roman era. Well, the Roman era. Now, let's see. Pretty much at the most power, the major power during the Mediterranean was pretty much of the Greek or Egyptian or Carthaginian military. So, we can see who actually was trading with who. Mainly the Greeks. Seeing as though, so, yeah, that's correct. The Celts of Iberia first copied off of the Greeks' hairstyle, growing out their beards and shaving their heads very short. In other words, technically about an inch of hair. Or some say 1 centimeter. I'm not certain where it's between it. But it is stated though that the Celts of Iberia kept this up until the Romans came along. And when the Romans came, it's stated they changed it again. This time to the form of the Roman. Growing out their hair a little bit short and pretty much shaving their beards. In other words, or sometimes if they were a high commander, they would actually grow out the beard. Or so I'm told. Now it is stated though that if you guys would have actually seen my old-fashioned haircut with my beard attached, you can actually see that's actually the length that it would actually have stopped at. In fact, it's stated that the Celts would keep that length pretty much through history. But it wasn't a very good hairstyle. Just saying. But now, as well, even the Celtic tribes that were north of Macedonia, Thrace, and Greece, these type of regions were actually had the same ideal hairstyle, but they kept the Greek hairstyle up until the Roman invasion. But now let's take a look at the Celts of Germania and including Dacia. Now, if you guys have never heard of these regions, the Celts of Germania only lived on the Rhine, near the Rhine River or north of the Rhine, only until the invasions of the Romans. By then, it was stated that after Augustus Caesar, it was actually stated that many of the Celts in the region changed their hairstyle or were pretty much slaughtered by the Germanic tribes that were of the Norse pagan religion instead of the Celtic Gallic religion. In which, yes, it sounds confusing, but I'll get to that some other time. But now, also, when it comes to the Celts of Dacia. Now, they actually had the same hairstyle as their Celtic Germanic kingdoms, but the way they grew theirs was a little different compared to the other Celtic tribes, which was recognized as a blasphemous type ideal. In fact, in this areas, it's stated that the Druids actually kept their hair short and cut their beards short, while the Celts of Dacia and Germania actually grew out their beards and grew out their hair, and woven them into impressive braids that would awe a foe from afar, it was said, in which some of them even turned into the buns on the head, like such that would be on the side, in which would take a whole strand of hair, elongated hair, and turn into a bun. Though I'm not so certain of how impressive that was at the time, but it was impressive to do even still today, since they did it on the side, not the back. Of what it meant, it stated it might have been that the person was married or not married, we do not know. But we do know that in history books that pretty much of the Celts, it was stated the following. Now, I can already hear you guys, okay, Templar, what about the women in this? Well, I'll get to that in a little while, but let me just get to the last Celtic tribes of Britannia, and I'll get to that right soon. But now, let's take a look at the Celts of Britannia. Now, and I hear you guys already, Templar, I don't know much about this, but it doesn't seem right. Well, the thing is, the Celts of Britannia actually did grow out their mustaches, but the problem is, they actually had this type of tribal kingdoms of Britannia had curly hair. Now, this sounds weird to many of you guys, but if you guys don't understand this, the Celts of these tribes could not grow out their beards like the Celts of Gaul, or even including they couldn't even grow it out, their hair, like the Celts of Gaul, because of the fact, if they did, it just ends up all curled up in a ball. It's kind of like with me, if you were to take a look at my old photos back when I was young, I had curly hair, yes, and I did not like it. And as well, pretty much with my beard, I can't grow it out as much because of my Celtic Britannic bloodline. In doing so, I can only grow out as much as, say, a small amount. But in truth, it is stated that though the Celts did have, Britannia did have short hair, this short curly hair was pretty much a phenomenal thing. In fact, if you guys even still today have curly hair, when you're born naturally with curly hair by itself, it's actually, or even scraggly hair as they call it, it's actually stated that the Celts, that means you have Celtic bloodline in your veins from Britannia. So, yeah, I got a lot of that in me, due to my mother's side of the family. But, yes, as you can also tell, I tried growing out my mustache, and it didn't go as far as it should have. Now, I could already hear you guys over time, but Templar, I'm not confused. Why was the Celts always grow out their mustaches in these other non-Romanized areas? And why was it forbidden? Well, it's actually even stated in history books that the reason the Celts grew out their mustaches was because it was a status symbol, meaning that it was their rite of passage. In other words, like of how many battles they've seen in the field, or I don't know if that's true or not. It's pretty much put in Roman books, and it's kind of confusing. Reason being that it's stated that if they kept growing out their mustache and shaving their beard, then it's stated that's how many battles they've seen throughout the years. And the longer it got, the longer and longer they were actually victorious. It's only when it's stated that if they had shaven it, that it's stated that they had lost a battle. Which is kind of impressive in that ancient world if you think about it. It was an impressive hairstyle that had status symbol. So it meant something. It's kind of impressive if you think about it. But now, enough about the men, let's go to the women. I know you gals want to hear about this. Well, just like the men, the ancient Celtic women of the ancient world actually copied off, had the same type of ideal standards. Well, let's take a look at the Celtiberians and the Celts that are north of Greece. Now, they actually did have the same hairstyle as the Romans and the Greeks. Weird thing though is the weirdest type of hairstyle I ever heard that the Celts did. Celtic women would actually cut the back end of their hair. In other words, all this hair in the back end would be shaven or cut up so short that their head would be showing, and they take the front end of their hair and tie it in the rear. Now, that sounds weird, I know, to this day, but in doing so, they actually created a flowing lock of hair that would actually surround the head from the rear. In other words, they don't need this hair in the back, they just need the hair in the front. It was impressive, and it's actually kind of symbolized something in history books, though all I could get out of it that it symbolized something to their ancient goddess, the goddess of Melekthust, or in English, the goddess of fidelity. Now, if you're in Celtiberia, it was a little different compared to the other Celtic tribes who had different goddesses of fidelity. So, I don't know if they kept this idealism up until they died off. I'm not certain. But or maybe they got married. It's confusing. But all we do know is there's only one skull in history in Spain that actually holds this type of symbol. Unfortunately, Google is not the very biggest friend of having you find this stuff. So yes, I actually had to try 1,000 places just to find it. But I still couldn't find it. But still, it is still an impressive design model. I mean, the way that this skull was found was that it was beautifully intact all throughout the years. But that was only the Celts of Iberia and the Celtic tribes north of Greece. What about the Celts of Germania and Dacia? Well, they had what you might call the Halmux lock. I know it sounds weird as much as the next guy, but this was actually a weird hairstyle that some Celtic women did. They would actually take the front end of the braids right in the front, and what they would do is braid it in the forwards. And in doing so, tie it in a knot in the back, and in the front, tie in a knot in the forwards position. Now, there is actually a reason though. Only a couple of times it's actually documented that the Celts did this. Young women would actually only leave the braids, well, looped out. And it's actually stated that, well, wives would actually tie it in a knot. Now this symbolized something, actually. It might have actually symbolized their marriage. And this is actually the cool part about it. If they braided the locks in the front, that means they were single. But if they did it in the back, if they turned it into a knot in the back, that meant that they were already married. So in other words, it might perform of how many times they were married, maybe? I'm guessing? I'm just putting a big guess, but still, it is pretty impressive. Unfortunately, as I stated, Google does not like actually you finding out historical items. But still, though, it was an impressive design model. But the rest of the hair, though, would be just left flowing outward. Or sometimes, they would even tie it into a big giant braid in the back. If you guys see in the images. But now, what else of the Celts of Gaul? What did those women do? Well, it's stated that in the following years they actually did follow the Romans, but the Celts of Gaul had a different type of standard. This was called the woven knot. Now, the woven knot was impressive. They actually took the hair from the back end of their head, all the hair on the back end of their head, such as around their neck area, they actually took it from the backwards position and pushed it forwards. And in doing so, they locked it in place by using an ancient type of bobby pins that we no longer see today, which were made out of some sort of material, maybe iron, some say, we don't know. But in doing so, they were either combed into place or as well knotted into place just to keep them there. And in doing so, it's actually stated that the hair would actually flow from the back to the front and to the back again. In doing so, having an extremely beautiful Celtic knotwork all the way along the side until it reaches the very end. Though some only did this. I'm actually told that only queens would do this, I'm told. I'm not certain if that was true or not. It's kind of confusing there. But it is stated, though, that some Celtic women that are the peasant class, actually, when they grew out their hair, it's in the process they would have actually done something. They would have actually tied the side ends of their head into braids, or including into knots. This would actually symbolize their, well, tribe, or including where they belonged. But now, what about the Celts of Britannia? Now, if you guys don't actually understand, the Celts of Britannia were a little bit hard to understand. In fact, unlike the other Celtic tribes, the Celtic women actually tied the sides end of their head, or their hair, into braids, or into knots, whichever way you want to pronounce it as, a braided knot. And in doing so, actually aligned it all the way to their back. Now, in doing so, it actually tied into a knot in the back end of the neck, symbolizing that they are married. But if they were not married, what they would do is actually have those braids just go down the back end of their hair, all the way. In other words, it's not going to have a knot on it until you get married. This symbolizes of who was, not married and who was married. In fact, the ancient Celtic women did this all on their own, and actually without even showing that they had a wedding ring. In other words, you didn't have to wear a wedding ring to prove that you were married back in the day. This was impressive still to this day. I would like to see a lot of you guys even try this for yourselves. Even try and put a image down below in the comments, like you're taking a photo of yourselves actually doing it yourselves. Because I would like to see you guys do that myself. Though can only grow out, since I'm a Britannic Celt, I can pretty much only get the curly hairs and including the mustache. Oh, but you get the point. But anyways, guys, if you guys want me to cover anything else of this month of March, of the month of March, ugh. Try saying month of March 5 times fast, ugh. Anyways, if you guys want me to talk about anything else in the month of March, let me know that in the comments below. Also, as I stated before, leave a photo of you guys trying to do any of these Celtic, Celtic hairstyles, and let me know of how it worked out for you guys. And as well, guys, if you also like this video, also subscribe to the channel, hit that bell button, and including share this with your friends and help them grow into the order. Anyways, guys, this has been Templar. Have a good day.